Dear viewers, my name is Margrethe Sobotka from the Lower Saxon Wadden Sea National Park Authority. I'm going to shortly introduce you to the context of the Wadden Sea Funding Guide and how it came about. Together with more than a dozen other project partners from 5 North Sea countries, we are working in the European Interreg North Sea Programme project PROWAD Link under the lead of the Common Wadden Sea Secretariat. PROWAD Link aims to test and implement ways on how the status of a landscape as protected area can be valorized for the benefit of a sustainable regional economy and at the same time for the protection of nature. As Lower Saxony, we have placed one of our focal points on the development of cooperation structures, especially to facilitate and promote long-term partnerships. Through our work, we support the development of a trilateral partnership hub for the Wadden Sea World Heritage and hope for its continuation after the end of PROWAD Link. In June 2019, a trilateral multi-stakeholder partnership was formally founded. It is a network of networks. Here, the Governmental Wadden Sea Corporation, the Wadden Sea Stakeholder Forum, the Wadden Sea team of green NGOs, the research community, and the networks on sustainable tourism and on environmental education jointly engage and intensify their cooperation. Further partner sectors and networks are welcomed. A partnership is not a purpose in itself. It lives from joint activities and successful projects. We noticed early on that a wealth of new ideas emerged from the new network, but that finances remained a problem. This motivated us to systematically search for third-party funding opportunities. And in this context, the Wadden Sea Funding Guide was elaborated, commissioned by the National Park Authority. I am now happy to announce Angelo Gilles and Dr. Cormac Walsh to continue to introduce their consultancies and their product, the Wadden Sea Funding Guide. Angelo and Cormac, the floor is yours.
My name is Angelo Gilles. I'm a project manager at REM Consult, and our company is located in Hamburg, Germany. And we're supporting clients in application processes to receive funding from different EU funding and national funding programs. And we are involved in several cross-border and transnational interregional projects as project as well financial managers. And in addition, we conduct also studies and analysis and collect good practices on a variety of topics, such as nature conservation or regional development or social innovation, for example. So in autumn 2021, we have been commissioned by the Lower Saxon Wadden Sea National Park Authority in the frame of the PROWAD Link Interreg North Sea Region project to develop, together with Dr. Cormac Walsh, the funding guide for the trilateral partnership in support of the UNESCO Wadden Sea World Heritage. And this funding guide actually has been published in April this year, and today, within the next approximately 30 minutes, we would like to take the chance to present the guide and some key results to a wider audience interested in the diverse funding opportunities for the Wadden Sea Guide. The overall rationale for this funding guide was first to navigate through the wide range of international and national funding programs and providing tailored information for selected funding opportunities for the trilateral Wadden Sea World Heritage Partnership. And this shall then maximize the usage of opportunities arising from the new European funding period, as well as for other national and subnational funding sources. And in particular, this guide shall then, of course, cater for the diversity of organizations and stakeholders of the trilateral Wadden Sea World Heritage Partnership. Thus, the specific focus of the guide is then on possible applications and potential funding opportunities, in particular for the trilateral cooperation between actors from Denmark, the Netherlands, and Germany. And secondly, as in parallel, there is an initiative developing a Wadden Sea research agenda with separate strands for fundamental and cutting-edge research funding for these kind of research activities. The emphasis here in the funding guide is more on practice-based projects with applied science activities, as well as the involvement of diverse disciplines and sectors. And last but not least, the aim was, of course, to assess funding opportunities in line with the objectives of the Memorandum of Understanding of the Trilateral Wadden Sea World Heritage Partnership, thus focusing on funding for activities which support the protection of the outstanding universal value of the Wadden Sea World Heritage and its ecosystems. Therefore, an in-depth analysis of the Memorandum of Understanding, as well as a survey of relevant topics and challenges among the Provat Link partners, their networks, the operational team partnership hub has been conducted. And based on this, we defined 5 potential topics with several subtopics for future projects and activities that are described in detail in chapter 2 of the funding guide. And these topics are: first, nature conservation; sustainable regional development as a second topic in support, of course, of the Wadden Sea World Heritage objectives; international cooperation, also beyond the Wadden Sea region; education and interpretation, as well as governance and World Heritage brand management. These topics, they provide the main basis for the match of suitable funding programs and related project actions, as well as of feasible funding scenarios for the Trilateral Wadden Sea World Heritage Partnership that we develop also within this funding guide. One thing, please note, these topics and the subtopics do not reflect a prioritization. Rather, all topics are considered relevant if they have a functional relation to the outstanding universal value of the Wadden Sea World Heritage. The topics and related objectives and challenges can be tackled, of course, by a multitude of actions. And the different funding programs on European, but also on national and subnational level generally support a variety of activities. And to facilitate the overview, we, in this funding guide, categorized the activities into recurring types of actions, we call them. And each funding program explicitly or implicitly defines which types of actions are supported and which are not. And I will get back to the relevance of these types of actions later in the presentation when taking a closer look at the matching between the funding sources and action types. With regard then to the geographical scope of the partnership, possible applications and the thematical topics, we selected the following European programs for detailed analysis. These are the Interreg cross-border programs, Germany, Denmark, and Germany and the Netherlands, the transnational programs, North Sea region and Interreg Northwest Europe, as well as the interregional program Interreg Europe. And furthermore, we analyzed also Horizon Europe, the LIFE program, Erasmus+, the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, and the European Agricultural Fund for Regional Development. For each of these European programs, you will find within the funding guide first a kind of, you can call it a business card, where we provided key characteristics of the programs, such as the geographical scope, the average project budgets, the funding rate, types of actions, or key links to program websites and documents relevant specifically for applicants. In the second part, we briefly then describe the program's overall objectives and, of course, the thematical priorities most relevant when it comes to the topics and action types. And finally, we provided more detailed information about opportunities to tackle topics relevant to the trilateral partnership within the priorities of the selected funding programs, thus giving already hints and insights for suitable matches between relevant topics and the funding programs. The same happened also for the national and subnational funding sources in the 3 different countries. But due to the sheer number of funding sources, we opted here for a table format with brief information on funding body, scale of operation, the types of actions that are funded by these sources, funding sources, the target applicants, and then the relevant thematic priorities. In addition, we also provide links to relevant projects funded by these national and subnational programs, and Cormac will get back to these funding sources on national, subnational level later on in this presentation. So let's take now a close look to the matching part. When it comes to the matching, we first evaluated how the topics and subtopics identified as relevant, we can see them here in the table on the left side, are represented by the strategic orientations and thematic programs of European funding sources listed on the top of this table. The darker the shade of blue in this table, the greater the match. And at a first glance, you might recognize a broad consensus here of, for example, regional sustainable development topics within specifically the Interreg programs. We would say that this comes at no surprise, as specifically the Interreg programs aiming at sustainable economic, social, and territorial development via their cross-border, interregional, or transnational cooperation and exchange projects. But the degree to which the topic of regional sustainable development can be oriented within projects towards the objectives of the trilateral partnership, that is variable. So let's have a look at different programs here. The Interreg Germany-Denmark program, with its priority on green region, for example, puts, when it comes to regional sustainable development, puts emphasis on the renewable energy sector and the creation of jobs in the region, while at the same time would like projects also to consider and monitor negative environmental impacts of the renewable energy industry. The same goes for the Interreg North Sea region program within its priority called climate resilience, where, for example, the exploitation of offshore wind energy shall go hand in hand with environmentally sound planning, and projects within this program may co-develop, test, and implement appropriate planning tools and processes with relevant stakeholders in this field. Regional sustainable development, this topic, within the Interreg Northwest Europe program may mean that within the priority 5, which is called transition towards a socially inclusive and resilient society, may mean to develop new tourist destinations and cross-border initiatives, for example, between the Netherlands and Germany, with a focus on sustainability, natural heritage, or the role of culture in terms of cultural heritage, or also cultural and creative industries. Funding possibilities for pure nature conservation, we're going back now to the matching table topics and EU programs. So funding possibilities for pure nature conservation actions can be found in the Interreg North Sea Region program, within Horizon Europe, and the LIFE program. And all 3 programs set a clear thematic focus within their certain priorities or specific calls on environmental protection, ecosystem restoration, or sustainable management of ecosystems. While the overall aim in all 3 programs is more or less the same, to restore and maintain healthy ecosystems and to preserve biodiversity assets and ecosystem services, both for nature and human, the activities or action types that are then funded by these programs may differ substantially. And this can be seen in the following table that provides an overview not of the topic, but of the match between funding sources on one hand and the action types I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. You can see here an excerpt of the table, and on the left side are the action types. So it is a match between funding sources and action types. And again, the darker the shade of blue in this table, the greater the match. First, when looking at this table, it should be obvious that each program and funded project is likely to include a combination of action types, meaning that none of these programs will just fund one action type, for example, a demonstration with regards to restoration measures for Wadden Sea ecosystems or an exhibition in a national park center. So this is rather this single funding of a single action type. This is rather to be found on national or subnational level. And second, what could be seen here as well is that the programs put emphasis on different action types. For example, Horizon Europe, more on research, Interreg North Sea Region on practical solutions, demonstrators, exchange of experiences and good practices, and LIFE on policy implementation. Translated to the topic of nature conservation, it can be stated that Horizon Europe is likely to fund more cutting-edge research and supports projects then to develop, for example, new or innovative observation and monitoring tools to provide, for example, data for the prediction of biodiversity decline. The Interreg North Sea Region program is rather focusing on practice-oriented solutions and would like projects to deploy adapted methods and technologies for environmental monitoring and test this and the practical application together with relevant regional administrations, small and medium-sized enterprises, NGOs, and citizens. The LIFE program, compared to this, is very strongly oriented towards the enforcement and implementation of EU legislations and policies. Those funded projects within the LIFE program should significantly contribute to these policies, for example, via the improvement of capacities of regional and local actors to govern monitoring programs. An example could be the management of Natura 2000 sites. So keeping these differences with regard to the action types within the different programs in mind, it is for you strategically important to decide at an early stage of a project development phase where your primary emphasis, expertise, and capacities are, so both in terms of topic and type of action, and then to select a European funding program accordingly. I will now hand over to Cormac to tell us more about the national and subnational funding opportunities, as well as on the funding scenarios we developed. And so, Cormac, the floor is now yours, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Angelo. So first of all, on this slide, we can see one aspect of the matching in relation to national and subnational funding sources. Here, again, it has been possible to classify the funding programs within each country according to the topics that we've previously identified. And we have done the same for the action types as well. Here, it is important to recognize that the topics are not mutually exclusive. This means that some of the key funding programs also at national levels will be relevant for a number of different topics. And it is also important to recognize that the key areas of focus for some of the national and subnational programs may in fact shift over time when new calls come out or due to a change in orientation. So some are much more dynamic than others, let's say. Here, this table really just illustrates some very recent examples of large-scale projects which have been funded from the national levels within Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark, from Nordea funds, the Wadden funds, and the Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt. These are really just examples, but it gives an indication of the potential and scope that is there with these funds. For our purpose here, really our emphasis is on the trilateral level and strengthening cooperation at the trilateral level. But nevertheless, these funding sources are very relevant. And here it's important to consider how can we develop synergies across some of these funding programs. We can think of this in two ways, or at least there are two options here. In the first case, we have a trilateral topic, which can then be supported by individual funding from each of the three countries. In the second case, we have a combination of bilateral funding. So in this case, German-Danish funding with national or regional funding from the Netherlands. So they will be two key options, I think, for combining national and subnational funds to develop a network perhaps, or to exchange information within a common umbrella at the trilateral level. And I think there is significant potential here as well to build on this type of approach in the future. Nevertheless, it is important to recognize that with national and subnational funds that there are key differences between the institutional structures and ways of working in Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. We just highlight a number of aspects here. Again, this is not intended to be comprehensive, but we can see in Denmark a very large number of potential funding bodies, and in particular philanthropic foundations. So philanthropic foundations play a more significant role in the Danish context than they do elsewhere. In Germany, again, we have a wide range of organizations. There is an additional layer of complexity here, if you like, because some of the organizations are at the federal level, whereas others are at the federal state, the lender level, or in some cases at a regional level. So there may be, it may be necessary in some cases to combine funds specific to Schleswig-Holstein and Lower Saxony within one wider trilateral umbrella. Within the Netherlands, we see a greater degree of centralization. There's a smaller number of key programs, with some, such as the Wadden funds, playing a very central role in this context. So if we move on to these scenarios, in total within the funding guide, we have outlined 4 scenarios on key topics. And the idea here really was to have worked through examples of if we hypothetically decided to develop a project under this topic, what options would there be? What types of action, and what would be the most suitable funding opportunities? So in this case, with sustainable tourism, the first step was to identify potential project activities or objectives. And this is a key step to move away from this high level of generality to become more concrete. So for example, a possible focus on awareness raising for visitors or improving visitor guidance. So this will be a type of action in itself. And there are very specific funding opportunities then within particular priorities or strategic objectives, in this case under the main Interreg programs. Similarly, if we look at the monitoring of tourism impacts, this may be in relation to applied research or capacity building or policy improvement. And here again, there's some overlap, but also other funding opportunities, particular programs that may be relevant in this case. So if we look in a little bit more detail, if we wish to pursue a project on sustainable tourism in the North Sea region, this is option 1 here, there would be opportunities under priorities 1, 3, and 4. In the first case, the emphasis is on innovation in the tourism sector. In the second, on the assessment and mitigation of adverse impacts of tourism on ecosystems such as the Wadden Sea. Priority 3 here may be particularly relevant to the Wadden Sea, but also priority 4 focused on conflict resolution among stakeholder groups and the fostering of cross-sectoral dialogue. This would be an area that would also be particularly relevant to the Wadden Sea context. Under option 2, then the selected program here is the Interreg German-Danish program. Again, this would be a case where we might say we develop a project here with particular stakeholders involved and maybe try to have a complementary project in the Netherlands as well. Under priority 3 of the German-Danish Interreg program, the focus is on an attractive region and gentle tourism, which can be interpreted as ecotourism. So there are potentials there for the, to foster ecotourism approaches at the Wadden Sea coast on a cross-border basis in Germany and Denmark. The focus here in the bilateral Interreg projects is always or almost always on concrete hands-on projects with an emphasis on local impact. Cross-border cooperation and network building is also a key aspect here. And of course, there are examples which can be drawn on here, previous experience in both bilateral program regions with successful Wadden Sea projects in the past. A further aspect within the funding guide is that we have developed a step-by-step guide of moving from the first stage of having a project idea to submitting an application. And we found that it is very important really to consider each of these steps and to adopt a structured and systematic approach as well. And this is why we thought that it was very important to include this within the funding guide also. So the first steps really are about setting out the idea, discussing it with colleagues to, if possible, get different perspectives as well, finding the right funding opportunities, so carrying out an analysis based on the matching here, for example, assessing the strengths and weaknesses of particular programs, checking what has been done before. This is critically important, particularly, I would say, with national and subnational funding programs, where it is really from looking at previous projects that you get a very good idea of what can be funded and what is maybe outside of the scope of a particular program. Developing an intervention logic, this is really the aspect of relating potential objectives to concrete actions, to outcomes and long-term benefits. So seeing what is the process, how can we best move from objectives to the outcomes that we wish to see in the future. Following on from this, it is possible to seek a consultation. REM Consult, of course, will be a very good partner for this. It is possible in many cases to look for seed funding from a range of different organizations. And following on from this, it's really very important to, at an early stage, to define your own role in the project. So whether lead partner or project partner, in some cases it may be as a passive partner within a wider project, but with still certain benefits. So there's quite a range or spectrum of different roles that an organization can take on within a project as well. So then you're moving towards setting up the right partnership and setting out a work plan with clearly defined roles and responsibilities, developing a project budget, and of course completing the application form and having it checked by a third party as well to make sure that everything is in there as it should be. It's also important where possible to remain active while waiting for the funding decision, so that there is, so it's possible to build on the momentum built up during the project development phase as well. Within the conclusions of the funding guide, we outlined some possible next steps. The emphasis, I would say, here is on possible. These are based on our analysis and our knowledge of the funding landscape, particularly at the European level. We think it is worth considering the development of a Wadden Sea World Heritage funding strategy. This would be to see what makes sense from a trilateral perspective, what types of projects, what types of actions we might be interested in for this particular funding period, and what combination as well, I think, is critically important. Whether the emphasis is on capacity building, on networking, on certain governance aspects, to really set that out on paper and see what are the priorities and how to address those strategically from a trilateral perspective as well. A second point would be the option of developing a Wadden Sea World Heritage virtual visitor card. This can take the form of a short one-page PDF document, perhaps, that could set out to potential partners, and particularly those beyond the Wadden Sea region. This is particularly relevant in the context of larger scale projects where large consortiums are developed, often with a geographical balance across Europe, where other partners may not be so familiar with the Wadden Sea region, and it is necessary to have a short introduction to the Wadden Sea context so that it is very clear at a first glance that this is what the Wadden Sea as a case study, as a partnership, as a context can bring to a wider consortium. There are examples internationally of where this approach is adopted quite successfully. It is also possible to, really at this stage I would very much encourage all stakeholders involved to begin the process of considering project ideas and maybe where relevant moving towards developing project proposals, strategically selecting funding programs at European and/or national levels, and also looking at how they may be combined in new ways as well to really maximize the impact for the Wadden Sea trilateral partnership. So yeah, that really is what we wanted to present today in terms of the funding guide. We hope that it has been informative and also inspiring, and that it encourages you as partners, as stakeholders, to really get involved and to consider the funding opportunities that are available at both European and national levels to support the core objectives of the Wadden Sea World Heritage and the projects that you would like to pursue. So thank you very much for listening, and we very much look forward to your questions and the discussion as well.